Welcome, Team Hubbard, to Wealth Matters Podcast. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing excellent. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Where are you right now? I know you are out of country, so I just want to remind my listeners right now.
I am home in my house in Colombia in South America.
Colombia,
Yeah.
nice. So, what's your primary job or business right now?
Well, I've been a real estate investor for the last 10 or so years. So I'm a full-time real estate investor. But the last 5 or so years, I've been focusing on finding properties that I can convert to short-term rentals. So that's been my primary focus. Yeah, probably about the last 5 years.
So, you just mentioned short-term rental. What do you mean by that? Is it Airbnb, VRBO, and could it
Mhm.
be something else?
Yeah, there's several different kinds of short-term rentals, but yeah, I do a lot on Airbnb, VRBO, and HomeAway. I would define a short-term rental as a stay less than 30 days. Actually, even over 30 days, I would say short-term. It's basically a furnished accommodation where you're renting out by the night versus, a normal year lease or something.
Got it. And when and why did you start investing in real estate?
For financial freedom, really, that's always been the goal. I read the Purple Book early on,
Yes.
Robert Kiyosaki, like a lot of us.
Haven't we
And
all, right?
yes, thank you, Mr. Kiyosaki.
Yep.
But yeah, that changed my mindset, and that's basically been the goal since the beginning, really.
So when you started in real estate, did you have anything in mind like short-term rental? And I would call it as STR on the podcast, just to remind
Mhm.
my listeners, so it makes it easier for. But when you started, did you start with STR or short-term rental, or did you start with single family, long-term rental, etc.?
My first place was a fourplex,
Okay,
and
wow, that's good.
yeah, yeah, it was a foreclosure, but it had tenants in it. It was owned by the
Okay.
bank. And I renovated a couple of the units and moved into that. And yeah, basically since the beginning was living with, positive cash flow, living there and earning money to live there, which was great. And so it started me off on a good path. And I didn't get into short-term rentals until maybe 5 or so years later. So I was still acquiring small multifamily properties, fourplex, duplex, occasional single family.
So I'm guessing that that was a good time to get into STR. But why did you switch? Again, I'm trying to throw a curveball here because
Yeah.
I'm not doing STR. I've been looking into it for years now. Just
Hmm.
didn't have the courage, even though I have been doing single family and of course then now recently small and large multifamily apartment buildings. But why did you switch to STR?
Yeah, yeah, good question. And I know it can be a little intimidating, the idea of having someone check in and check out maybe every
Yeah.
day. Seems like a lot of work. It doesn't have to be, there's lots of operations, but basically, I got into it. I've been using Airbnb to travel for years, um, and staying in short-term rentals all over the world. And I had a property in a pretty good location in downtown Northern California, and I was planning on moving into it. Actually, I wanted to live downtown. I could walk to places, so I renovated it and I furnished it. But at the same time, I was sort of thinking maybe I could rent this as a short-term rental. So I decided to put it up as a short-term rental before I moved into it, and it's been rented ever since. Really high occupancy, and so that sort of changed my thinking. And then I don't know, maybe a year or so later, I had converted a couple others, and I was trying to get out of the market or just look for new markets out of California. And so I was traveling around the US and went to quite a few different cities and states, and was also staying in short term rentals while I was looking for other investment opportunities. I was actually looking for long term rentals, but I realized while staying in the short term rentals that I was paying almost as much as I was charging in California for my short-term rentals, and but the property values where I was staying were way less, so the
Yeah.
returns were way higher. And then it just, light bulb went off and I just started focusing on that since then.
Nice. And that does make so much sense. And even when I'm traveling, I usually tend to use Airbnb or VRBO, not only just because it's easier and it's a better value for money, but it's also just to help out other investors, right? In,
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
day-to-day life, I don't get to help out other investors the way I would want to, like monetize them, right? Of course, by
Hmm.
podcast and all, I'm trying to help out, but this is one way for me to give back, right? Because I get good value for money and nice property, and I'm
Hmm.
helping them to run their business.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's a reason that Airbnb's grown so quickly, since they started, I think in 2008.
Right.
But it's because people enjoy the accommodations. It's more of an experience versus just staying in the normal 250 square foot hotel with a bed and a dresser. You get, especially if it's in a new place you've never been,
Yeah.
you really can feel sort of part of the neighborhood,
Right.
and it's a good value a lot
Oh
of the
yeah.
time.
Yeah. And you can feel like home, if you have the right property, you have everything available, you can feel
Hmm.
right at home. You don't have to wait for, in hotel room, you may not even have a microwave or anything.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You have a kitchen, you can go
Yeah,
to the grocery store and buy some food and
exactly.
cook up some spaghetti if you
Yes.
want.
Someone like me who is vegan, when I'm traveling, and some places I have hard time finding anything. You know,
Totally.
being in Portland or California or Seattle, I can find a lot of vegan places, but not everywhere. So, that helps out as well. Hey, so my question, this next question is very important for me as well. And the reason is, of course, as you mentioned, you are from California, moved to Colombia, but
Mhm.
people based out in California or even San Francisco Bay Area, we can't invest in our own backyard because it's too expensive, as well as it does the ROI doesn't make sense. It means there is no ROI pretty much, right? So
Right.
I started investing out of state, and even till now, I've been doing that for 5 years. A lot of people come and ask me, why don't you invest in your own backyard? How can you trust a property manager? What do you think would happen if do you travel there every month to check out on the property?
Hmm.
And that's the reason I haven't been able to do STR. Not just the reason I want to find someone who is right to take care of my property, but
Hmm.
you are not even out of state, you're out of country, so how do you manage the STR while living so far away?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think living out of the country is any different than living outside of the city. I mean, if you're too far to make it to the property, then you're too far to make it to the property, and you have to find good team members like you
Right.
do with long-term rentals. So the fact that I'm in a different country is actually not much different than just being in a different city. And it all comes down just to having good team members, but then also good operations, set up for your team members, so that they
Right.
know how to respond to certain, maybe guest issues
Uh-huh.
or all those types of things. So good processes and good team members, and it doesn't need to be any different than any other real estate investment.
So I'm pretty sure over the years you have set up certain processes to follow, and pretty much when you're setting up your team, you are asking them to follow those guidelines as well as processes, right?
Hmm.
And if I am correct, you're planning to teach on these processes or guidelines as well as how to run the business and operations in near future, right?
Yeah, no, I'm really excited. We just started a new little branch, and yeah, I'm going to be teaching basically everything I've learned. I have a management company which I started. It just manages my own properties, but we've accommodated over 10,000 guests now, and we have great reviews and super
Wow.
status and all that, and we're still expanding and scaling, and so. Naturally, I've had lots of friends and family ask me, and people I meet at conferences. So yeah, I'm really excited finally putting it all together and going to be teaching it live, and eventually have a video course as well.
That's amazing, and I'm happy for you, of course. And just to remind everyone, Tim is also #1 best-selling author. He was one of the co-author as well in the book, which we both have co-authored. So looking forward to this new chapter Tim is launching on the Airbnb. So Tim, can you elaborate a little more? What kind of team do you set up when you are trying to set this up as out of state or out of country STR?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's basically you have the same team members no matter where you are, and it does depend on how big you are. I mean, if you're starting off smaller, you don't need extra management, multiple layers of people to oversee things. When you're starting off, really you need a housekeeper and a maintenance person, and you can have the housekeeper a lot of times handle a lot of the guest questions and things that pop up. But you can also use there's quite a few services now. It's like every day there's something new coming out to help with the industry, but there's lots of online reservation services as well that will handle your reservations for you and then just give a schedule to your housekeepers. So that's the combo that I use. I do all of my reservations virtually, basically, with a virtual team. And then our schedule goes out to the housekeepers. If anything happens at one of the units, the housekeepers notify the maintenance people. And, if there's any sort of guest issues, then that can come back to either your housekeeper, or if you have a manager, that can come back to them. So basically just, housekeeper, maintenance person, someone to handle reservations.
Okay. So even after having the team to do the reservations, housekeeper, maintenance, etc., the numbers still work, right?
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, some of the virtual services that you can use now are really affordable. And, I've got lots of people that are hiring VAs out of the Philippines.
Yes, I was going to say Philippines mostly. Yep.
Yeah, English speaking place, South Africa also, good
That's
English,
true.
low cost there. But really, you can empower your housekeeper and they like to get involved, really. I mean, they see the guests coming in and out. And so what we'll do, or what I started doing originally, was I just left the phone number, my housekeeper, I should say, left her phone number. And if any issues came up with the guests, they just call them directly. And they're the ones that are more familiar with the property. They're closer to it. So you can, really just empower your housekeeper to tackle a lot of those roles in the beginning.
Nice. So I have another question about investors. Who do you think are ideal investors for STR?
Well, what I'm teaching is, before we think about converting these properties into short-term rentals, we want to find a good property to start out with. So something that's in a good market, has strong employment and population growth, and it's landlord friendly. So the property from the beginning, needs to be a good property. But really, after that, I mean, anyone that wants to earn high returns, I mean, you can earn 2, 3, 5. I have some properties earning 8 times the amount of the long-term rent. And when you can set it up all passively, it's really open to anyone that's willing to just put up a little upfront work. It's open to anyone. You there, Alpesh?
So have you seen that STR does not work for certain type of people or personalities, like someone who is really control freak? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I would say where most people get hung up and maybe intimidated is maybe that person that wants to control everything. You really do kind of have to trust your team and let go a little bit. And if you're the person that's starting off, doing all the cleaning, and you're really maybe emotionally attached to the property, it could be more difficult for that person. But once you can step away from that and empower someone or hire someone to do those roles, then you can really scale just like you could with other real estate investments. And you'll find that everything works out, as long as you set up the right processes. Maybe you have an occasional hiccup here or there, but it all works out. And it's a short learning curve. There's certain questions and things that pop up, but once they pop up, you figure out how to handle them, and then as long as you handle them correctly, they don't pop up again. So it really gets easier and easier the more you do it.
Got it. So now I want to talk about the mistakes. So can you talk about some of the mistakes you have made and then learn from those mistakes? What did you learn from those mistakes?
Sure. Well, I guess a big one in the short-term rental world is that you want to be in a market that allows for short-term rentals, and it's such a new industry that some places don't have regulations set up yet. So you can be taking a risk by starting in those places before they have regulations set up. For example, I started in California. I already had properties there and they're already cash flowing well with long-term tenants. And they didn't have any regulations when I started, but they do now, so I would definitely suggest for anyone that's looking to get into property specifically for short-term rentals that they do their due diligence on the regulation side, and ideally find a market that has permitted it and you can get a permit to do it, or find a property that has commercial zoning, or a mixed use zoning. So that's one thing. Another thing, some of my properties perform better than others, and what I found, I try to cater to a business traveler and tourists, so I have a pretty big market segment. But I have found the bigger properties don't return quite as much, unless maybe you're in a place that has events day in and day out all year round. If it's in a place that doesn't have as many events and you're catering towards a business person, they're going to be looking for smaller units.
Right.
So those will stay more occupied, and they also cost less to furnish. The utilities are less, so the return dollar for dollar I found is a lot better on a smaller unit than it is on a bigger unit.
Got it. So in which markets do you have STRs?
I'm in Sacramento where I started, but I'm actually sort of working my way out of there. And then I'm in Memphis, and that's where I'll be doing the first event. And so we're actually going to walk through some of my properties and see the whole process and properties that are live and in action, with guests coming in and out.
That's amazing, and perfect time to sail out of Sacramento.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yep.
so why did you pick STR in Memphis? Because I know Memphis has a lot of long-term rental, and there are way too many companies, turnkey companies operating in that market. So somehow I never even evaluated that market for long-term rentals because I felt like there was just way too much supply, right? But what do you think about STR, and how did you pick that market?
Well, when I was looking for new markets, I guess this was 5 years ago, I went to Texas, and I went to Tennessee, and I went to Atlanta and Arkansas, and quite a few places. And I found actually that most of these turnkey markets, where there's lots of turnkey providers, are pretty good places to start because they have strong fundamentals, right?
Right.
And that's why the turnkey providers are there. But there are also markets that aren't super hot, like the coastal markets like San Francisco and New York and DC and these places. So the returns are much, much higher. And I guess I settled on Memphis just because I happened to find the best property there to start off with, and I was open to whatever best option came first, I guess.
Got it. And how did you start? Well, what did you do? What kind of due diligence did you do for the market as well as the location of the property, etc.?
Mm-hmm. Well, I like to be in sort of Midtown areas. My company is called Midtown Stays, and because I found, it's in between like downtown and the suburbs, so you have lots of business people traveling there because it's near downtown, but that you also have a mixed use sort of area where you have restaurants and entertainment options, but you have residential living too. So I sort of hone in on those areas. And I forgot the first part of your question.
Oh yeah, how did you then decide on the due diligence, the location as well of the property?
Yeah, sure. So I sort of started looking in that Midtown area first, and I had stayed in Airbnbs there because I was staying in short-term rentals there while I was looking for the long.
So we are back. We had a hiccup with the internet service, but we are back. Tim is on the call with me now. So hey, Tim, can you talk about your best STR deal? And if you can share the numbers, that would be even better.
Yeah, sure. So like I kind of touched on earlier, I found that the smaller units tend to do better. I'll just break down one unit out of a building that I got, which was a studio. The building had mixed units, studios, 1 bedroom and 2 bedrooms. And let's see, this is in the Mid-South, so the long-term rents are not very high. And for a small studio, I think I was getting like $425 a month for a long-term renter.
Wow.
And that place now probably averages $2,500 a month, and it's small. So, the utilities aren't high, the expenses aren't much higher, and it stays pretty well occupied. The good thing is too, as long as you set it up right and you get good reviews in the beginning, your occupancy usually actually increases, because you get repeat guests and things like that. So,
right.
Yeah, I mean, that was a significant increase in rents, $425 to basically average $2,500. And I've seen that units, furniture for a place like that, maybe $3,000. So the returns can be really, really high.
That's amazing. So, and what is your worst deal ever? It may not be just short-term rental, maybe long-term rental, but if you can talk about that. And STR, we can learn as well.
Yeah, I would say, fortunately, I haven't had any that have been just complete duds or failures, but I would say I bought a small group of condos that didn't have HOA, fortunately, because I got all of them. There's 8 in this little community, but they were newer. They're built in 2008, and they're much bigger. They each had 2 AC systems, sort of a townhouse, 3-story place. And, they just don't stay as occupied as the other ones, probably partially because it's just a bigger unit, and again, I think the smaller ones stay more occupied, but it has a lot of stairs. That deters, quite a few people as well, maybe an older generation, older crowd. It costs way more to furnish.
Right.
The utilities are much higher. So I would say those condos were probably the worst deal in terms of short-term rentals. But I think in terms of our best, it was still good.
Yeah, HOA cost as well as the HOA restrictions, they add up, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
definitely.
I have this last question that, let's say, and this question will help me as well. Someone who is just starting out in STR, right? Someone who is experienced with real estate.
Mm-hmm.
Where do they start?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and someone who doesn't care about the market. So where do they start looking at the markets if they are trying to figure out what markets to get in? And then what are the steps someone would follow? I'm pretty sure they can look at a website called airdna.co, right? But are there any other tools do you use, or do you have any tips and tricks?
Yeah, I think following the turnkey providers, that have all the turnkey rentals and I think those are great markets to start with. The rent to value ratios are higher there, and they'll be much higher once you convert it to a short-term rental. So I think that's a great place to start. Once you've sort of honed in on a market, you just want to make sure that the regulations are okay. And you can do that simply just by calling the city planner and say, hey, do you guys have any regulations against this? If so, what are they? And then the third step would just be, to run some comps. And you can do that by looking up other short-term rentals in the area, either through AirDNA or Airbnb, see how occupied they are and see what rates they're getting. And then you have a pretty good idea. I wrote I get this question a lot too. So I have a free ebook that people could download as well. That basically my tips for finding the best markets and best properties. They could pull off my website as well.
Okay. How can my listeners download that free ebook?
Yeah, you can go to restmethods.com. So it's REST for real estate short term, and then methods.com, METHODS. And they'll see it right there on the front page. It's a guide to acquiring the best properties for the best short term rental. That's
awesome. And how can they learn more about the training course you have put out there?
Oh, yeah. So also from that same website, Rest Methods, there's a events tab up the top. You can click on that. We can see the next date. It's going to be in Memphis coming up here, October 11th to 13th. But I also have save my spot for the next one because I plan on doing it once every quarter, probably. Pretty excited about it. So yeah, you can find all the info there on the website.
And I really wanted to attend this one, but I can't. So I promise you I'll be there next time. But I remember you mentioned about having some promo code for my listeners, or there was some discount available right now.
Yeah, they can actually. So we're just getting ready to release it. I haven't really marketed to too many people yet. So they can go on there right now, and it's half off, actually, without a promo code. So, yep, just go to Rest Methods and then save my spot, and it'll already be half off for them.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much, team. Mm-hmm. I thoroughly enjoyed this podcast, as well as I learned a lot out of it. And good luck with the course.
Good. Yeah, thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Be good, and thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Have a great weekend.